Good morning. Welcome, everybody. And I should say, good morning. You made it. Yeah, first session of the day, and you're here. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Evelyn Padrino, and I'm going to guide you through a session to help you understand how we're bringing optimization to our cloud investments on Azure. I'm going to be joined by a very selective group of experts at Microsoft, Jeff, Rob, and Vikram, who are going to be walking you through some of the scenarios and the product specifics that we have. What do? I do customer success for Azure at Microsoft. And today, in this session, we're going to talk about why adopting FinOps is important. How does it help Azure investments really maximize the value of those investments? Why we are investing in our products and our experiences to help you effectively manage those costs, and then how we're bringing the FinOps capabilities to life. But I'm going to start with our mission, because, right, this is what excites us at Microsoft. Our mission, as you know, is helping customers achieve their potential, achieve more, every customer, every organization. And this is super important when we think about maximizing your cloud value from the investments you made on Azure. What we want to do here is to really talk about how adopting these FinOps practices, capabilities, principles, really bring that value with Azure. And these are the three main things that we are going to be talking about today in this session. Why is FinOps important? Well, as you all know, it gives you cost visibility. In a service space, service business, it's really hard to control and have clarity on what's going on cost-based. How do you bring that visibility to drive accountability and be able to govern those costs across large organizations, different teams? To what? To drive optimization and true efficiencies from those investments. So when we think about FinOps capabilities, you are all familiar with all 18. We're going to talk about 7 of them today. And we are grouping them in 3 scenarios. The first scenario is about cost analysis and cost allocation and managing shared cost. This scenario probably is happening earlier in the process when organizations or FinOps experts are allocating the cost in different teams and then looking at how do we manage the shared cost of the shared services. The second scenario, a little bit more into that journey, when you start doing some analysis of that data, working on showback and managing anomalies. And then lastly, that is the third scenario, as you see here, we're grouping some capabilities that are a little bit more around managing. How are we driving efficiencies and utilization in our resources? What do we need to do to effectively manage our workloads? Architect our components come into that conversation. And then finally, thinking about the different opportunities that we offer in terms of commitment-based savings, which is one of the easiest or fastest ways to realize cost savings. So first scenario, cost allocation, managing shared cost. For cost allocation, we drive things into our core product for cost optimization and cost management, which is Microsoft Cost Management. There are multiple capabilities into that product, and we continue to invest on new capabilities, including AI capabilities that are coming up soon. But in this particular capability for cost allocation, there are a few things that our product allows, which is all about that insights and reporting. Tagging, which is something I heard a lot during this conference, so important to be able to tag resources in an effective way for management. And resource grouping. Obviously, the cloud, Azure, is like a puzzle of services. So even when you need some tagging, it's very important to be able to group these resources in a way that makes sense. Workloads, applications, different groupings. Then when we talk about managed shared cost, I'm bringing here 2 screenshots on 2 of the key products. Obviously, Microsoft Cost Management, where you can see specific resources being allocated to different groups and run analysis in it. And then our Azure policy, where you can set up policies for different resources or resource groups or subscription level to define cost limits, different services that can or not be deployed for your workloads. All that fully customizable for your needs in Azure policy. But I'm gonna now invite Vikram, one of our experts, to show you more about this on cost management.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you. So we'll go through some of the ways where you can group costs. So Evelyn mentioned that grouping the cost is the starting point, at least setting up your structure, your organization structure, tagging structure. These are important constructs before you can actually optimize your costs. So I'm just going to go through one of two major pivots here, which is what to start with. Let me go forward. Yeah, start with how do you group your costs based on your account type. Depending on what your account type is, there are different grouping structures. Like if you have enterprise accounts, you can group by the billing account, which is the top level construct, but you can create things like the departments and accounts, which can be constructs within your department, or they could be for workload types. Similarly, if you have a Microsoft customer agreement, MCA agreement type, you can group it based on things like the billing profile, invoice sections. These are effectively constructs that allow you to group your costs, not just basically the costs that come from your invoice, but also even grouping your invoices. So there are cases where, for various reasons, you might want different invoices. And with billing profiles, that is a possibility that is there, where once you group those by different billing profiles, you can get different invoices. So that's just a very high level on the account grouping itself. That's a starting point. Evelyn talked about tags, and tags is it's a very powerful construct to group costs. You can apply tags at resource level so that resources can be grouped basically by different constructs, like let's say it's a production resource, apply a production tag. If it's a resource that is there for, say, a team, you can apply a team level tag. And tags can be applied at different levels too. You can apply it when a resource gets created, or you can apply it a container like the subscription or the resource group. The advantage of applying at the container level is you can apply policies so that if your developers are creating resources, they don't need to remember that tag the resource when the resource is getting created. Going forward, tagging also, we have capabilities which allow you to group at the container level and inherit these tags. And inheriting the tags also is one of those capabilities where, as usage or cost usage is flowing, that usage gets tagged using the container level tags. And again, this is one of those capabilities where developers don't have to remember that when a resource is created, apply a tag like production or a department tag. With tag inheritance, there are a few things that come in. Things like what happens if there are conflicts between a container level tag and resource level tag. And there are policies which allow you to choose one or the other based on the conflict policy. So that's just a very high level on grouping of resources using account constructs and tagging. Next, we'll go into allocating cost and how shared costs can be managed. So one of the constructs that we have is how you split shared costs. There's a capability called cost allocation, which allows you to take costs from one container and reallocate it to another container. For example, you could take subscription one's cost and allocate it to a different subscription or a resource group, or a cost from one tag and apply it to a different tag. This is basically proportionally dividing costs. If a subscription is shared between two different teams, you could basically take the cost of that subscription and allocate it back to the responsible teams. To allocate the cost itself, there are various sort of policies that you can apply. You can either distribute the cost evenly, distribute it by the resource that is getting used, like using compute costs or networking costs or storage costs. So these are just policies of how you'd allocate a source level cost to a target. And once these get allocated, the costs basically show up as shared costs or reallocated costs in the cost analysis experiences in the cost management. So this is a very high-level overview of how you would go reallocating split shared costs. There are different strategies that you can follow for shared costs, including tax, but I'm just giving one flavor of that here. So going forward, I'll hand back to Evelyn for further capabilities that help you dive deeper into these capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikram. All right. So for the second scenario, as I said before, we're going to cover data analysis, showback, and managing anomalies. These are the two capabilities that we want to talk about. And as I mentioned, you will see a lot of cost management in this session. As I said, this is our core product for cost optimization, cost management on the cloud, hence the name. So when we think about data analysis and showback, going back to cost management, another capability that it has, it is really showing where is the cost going, through what services. Again, based on what Vikram just shared, it's very important to use the tagging capability to be able to understand what are the different resources, subscriptions, and you can leverage all that tagging to understand how your cost is happening and run analysis from them. But the value of cost management doesn't stop actually on the product. There is an important API connector for Power BI, where you can really run analysis and run specific scenarios where you are looking into running models, digging down into the reporting, and actually sharing with others where to do effectively showback and really share where is our cost going. So those are critical elements of the journey for cost management. Then managing anomalies, again, cost management, again, is going to be the common denominator during this session. Where here in cost management, you can define alerts, really build those, provide the limits, signals, whatever type of decisions you want to make sure that when anything goes above or near that threshold that you have set up, you get that alert. And really help you manage and use the service, the platform, to help you understand where things are going in this 24/7 business. But at the same time, we have Azure Monitor that also, similarly to cost management, you can set up different rules and alerts. And it tells you how the different services or workloads, tags, resource groups, everything that you want to set up, brings and gives you those alerts, monitoring and understanding how are things coming and happening in your workloads and services deployed on Azure. But I'm going to stop talking and call another expert to show how do we do this in these products. Rob.
Thank you, Evelyn, and good morning, everybody. So, as Evelyn just mentioned, Vikram talked a few minutes ago about telling you some of the core constructs that we have in Azure about how to enrich the data, how to tag it and allocate it so that the data is meaningful. So I want to jump into how do our tools help you get the visibility you want then of how you're going to get to be able to make insightful decisions off of that data. So first and foremost, very simple, how do you get to our cost analysis tool? So you're navigating to the Azure portal, looking for the cost management pane. Just note, for those of you that are familiar with this, you'll see a cost management and billing and a cost management. We're encouraging you to use cost management. It's a transitional thing where we're trying to organize our menus to align more to the life cycle of FinOps, so navigating to cost management, and then from within there, cost analysis. And that's going to bring you to the goodness of our cost analysis that we're going to talk about today. So when I jump into cost analysis, what it's going to start with is going to give me a list of views. It's kind of a navigation tree of where do you want to go and what do you want to see. And that's kind of over some feedback we've had of customers wanting to be able to directly navigate into the views they're looking for, and not just drop them into some common views. But the accumulated cost is kind of the big overall view. So we're going to jump into that first. What you see when you jump into the accumulated view cost is the high-level, big bang view of what you're spending, where you're forecasting, and what your budgeting is look like. So you'll see in the dark green my actual cost for this particular scope, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I can define scopes a little bit like what Vikram was saying at the billing account level. It can be at a subscription level. It can be at a management group level. So for this subscription, I'm seeing what the costs are. in the dark green. Light green is showing me projected costs. And if I have a budget allocated against this particular scope, you're seeing that red line across the top and even the little red range in the corner that's telling me I'm looking like I'm going to go over my budget. So big high-level view. But that's a starting point. So what you'll see from here is these are our customized views, and I have a lot of ways to slice and dice this data. I can change the presentation layer from this area graph to, I can do stacked line charts, whatever. So however you want to visualize it, a lot of flexibility there. I can change the granularity. This is starting out as an all-up accumulated cost, but I can change that to be daily, monthly, if that's the view I need. I can group by a bunch of different dimensions. I won't go through all of these, but I have the ability to really group them by any dimension that is important for what I'm trying to, the decision-making I'm trying to drive. And then, of course, I have all the flexibility of what date ranges I want to look for. A lot of pre-configured sections, but I can slice and dice this to any type of time range and how I want it to see. And as I said, I don't have on here, I can change the scope of the billing to be as granular, as high level as I want. So that gives me the ability to create the views that I need. Well, of course, if you do that, we don't want to have to reproduce that work very often, so it's easy for us to be able to save and share those views. So simple clicks in the portal, I can save this view so that I can come back to it later, and then I can get a shareable link. So I can easily email that link to people. I can embed that into some kind of reporting portals if I want. But understand this is all backed by role-based access control. So by creating a view and sharing a view, I'm not giving anybody access to anything they don't already have access to. So if I give this link to somebody that only has view over a small subset, when they open the view, they're going to see their subset, not the larger subset that I might have. So you're not giving away access by giving away a view or granting anything. But we've learned from our customers and a lot of feedback that the customizable views are great. It gives you the ability to change what you want, but we've built some curated views of things that are pretty common ways that customers are looking to allocate, be able to look and understand and allocate their data. So these smart views, you'll see on this list, as I said, all the different views that you get as a starting point, but the smart views are a new thing we've built that give me a couple of different views that I can dive into. So a view by reservation, so I can understand how my reservation usage is going, and I can dive into that. Usage by resource groups, usage by service types, and usage by subscriptions. So 4 of the main, most common asked for. And each of these views, when I dive into them, as I said, you'll see the little arrows next to each. It gives me the ability to really dive in and be more granular, so I can really look at a particular reservation, look at a particular resource group, and understand all of the resources underneath there. So that much more curated view. So that's a quick glance at how you get the customized insights out of our cost analysis portal. Just touching on this a little bit, but there's a lot more. So as Evelyn's introduction talked about, we also have Power BI as a way to understand this data better, because there are occasions where you're going to want to manipulate the data a little differently or get some different views. So our cost management Power BI app that's at the link you see here is a pre-configured canned set of reports that show you some extended and some different views than you're getting in our cost analysis pane. There's a little bit of overlap now, admittedly, but you'll see there's a cost by service. It gives me a little better ability to trend and view over time. The middle pane there is a big one of the Azure hybrid benefits that gives you the ability to see how well you are or how well you could be leveraging your on-premises software licenses to reduce your cloud costs. And then the bottom one is reservation usage again. So we're doing a lot more about reservations in some of our other views. But this is kind of a starting point at dipping your toe into managing and manipulating data in Power BI outside of the portal as this pre-canned. But it gets even better for those that are more adventurous. So what we do have, if you're comfortable and strong in Power BI, we have a Power BI connector for the Power BI desktop. So within Power BI desktop, you go to get data and navigate, as you see on the screen, and there is a connector that you can configure. When you put in your credentials and do the configuration, you'll see that now I see all the tables of data that are available to me. So at this point now, this is a blank canvas. All the tables are now your color palette, and you can be the artist to create any beautiful visuals and any more powerful reports that you want to see. So, so now we've opened up the world to, here's all the data, here's our powerful reporting tool. You can build this, you can share this, everything you can do with Power BI. You now have the ability. Some of the common use case scenarios that we really see with this are data manipulation. So within our query language within Power BI, I have the ability to manipulate some of the data coming in. Like we've talked, and I've heard in some other sessions about the power of tagging. Well, until you get a full tagging structure in place, if there are other bits of data like naming conventions that help me do some of that allocation, some of our query language can allow that as I pull that data in, I can manipulate it to actually group it the way it needs to be until the tags are in place to actually group it there. So sort of a stopgap, sort of a way to enrich it. And one of the other ones is combining this with on-premises or other sources of data. Like I heard in a session yesterday, someone talking about using ServiceNow as their source of record. So if I have a lot of information in another source, I don't necessarily want to write automation that takes all of that and applies those as tags and try to keep them in sync. But Power BI can use different sources of data to merge that together to say, take what I have from Azure, take what I have from ServiceNow or a different source of record, and create really powerful reports. So this is really, like I said, the blank canvas that allows you to create the super reports. But with all of that said, you don't want to manage your business just on hoping people look at reports and actually act when they need to act. But we want to notify people. We want to let people know there's something they need to act on. And that's where we bring in anomaly detection. So back in our cost analysis view, what it didn't highlight on the views before, you'll see the anomaly detection is running, and there will be a little link that's highlighted in here where we detect anomalies, one click, and it's going to give me a list of all of the things that Azure sees as, this is something you need to investigate. And I can look at any one of those. When I click on one of those, it brings me back to that accumulated cost view, and so it allows me to see exactly where my spike is. Like in this case, I'm watching the stacked graph, and now I see a spike at the end. I can dive in and see exactly what's driving this particular anomaly. But even there, this is somebody looking at it. So what's the logical conclusion of that is I want to go ahead and set up anomaly alerts. So through a portal, I can configure, hey, for these anomalies that I'm seeing in a particular scope, I want to send emails. I get to configure who to send them to, what I want them to look like, fire that up, and then you see an example of what an alert looks like that somebody gets when an anomaly happens. That way you're proactively telling somebody, go take a look at something. Stick to your day job. Don't just look at reports all day and try to find problems. Let us tell you when the problems are there, and you can act on them. So there you have it. That's a very high level, very quick view of how you get insights through our different tooling. So hopefully that's meaningful. Back to you, Evelyn.
Thank you, Rob. Fantastic. So I'm very excited to hear, and every time I hear these sessions, I get super excited about the capabilities that our products have. And thinking ahead and helping you all manage these resources in a way that is very efficient. So you really focus on your business, as we always say, and we use the technology to help you where to look at. But now in our last scenario, we're going to touch on these three capabilities. So you heard about cost management and Azure Monitor, but for resource utilization and efficiency, I'm bringing up another product, Azure Advisor. Azure Advisor is also part of the Azure portal, and it's a service available to all that gives you guidance and signals on how you are effectively using your deployed resources on Azure in alignment with best practices and guidance that we have primarily in the well-architected framework. So Azure Advisor is the very small boxes in the view here, but Azure Advisor has 5 boxes, 5 pillars that are aligned to the well-architected framework pillars: cost, security, reliability, performance, and operations. And it tells you for the subscription where you're running this Azure Advisor, how the different services, as I said, are deployed. It also includes an advisor score that helps you identify and prioritize what are the recommendations that I need to implement to bring this workload, this subscription, to a healthier state, to a more secure state, or making sure that it's more reliable and cost efficient. When we think about workload management and automation, there are two new services I'm going to talk about here, Azure Automation and Logic Apps. With Azure Automation, you can set up rules again and really proactively use the technology to, for example, shut down services when you are not using them. This is very good for non-production workloads. When you don't need to run your servers over the weekend, you can set up a specific timing to shut down services and really automate that management of that workload, not only for cost implications, but also sustainability implications. And you can really have that carbon emissions under control when you are automating the shutdown services. And then in Logic Apps, absolutely bringing all this and tracking all these specific situations, what's happening in your workload, what are the different components, and also proactively managing your workloads with the insights and information that you have through Logic Apps. But then the last capability that we're covering here today is managing commitment-based discounts. As I said at the very beginning, this is one of the easiest ways to probably drive cost savings. But it's very important to understand what the different providers offer. And in Microsoft, we have three main offers to help you manage cost, but in a way that is commitment between you and Azure. Probably you're familiar with all three of them. Reservations, which gives you a specific hardware in a specific service in a specific region that you have a commitment from 1 to 3 years. It has less flexibility, but it gives you the deepest discount. Then in comparison with that, savings plan for compute, when you set up an hourly commit for the services that are covered in this plan, like app service, VMs, of course, and a few others. And it sets that hourly rate that you're going to pay, and all the services are covering that rate. And it's way more efficient. It gives you more flexibility, but obviously it's a little bit less of a deeper discount. And then hybrid benefit, Rob just touched on it. This is one of the benefits of Microsoft bringing your on-prem, this very massive presence that you have in existing servers and resources on your own data centers and on-prem locations, to bring that value of that license that you own to the cloud and really take advantage of the savings that that gives you based on that ownership. But I'm going to invite Jeff now, our last expert, to show you how we do some of these things in our products.
Well, thank you. My name is Jeff Amels. I'm a cloud financial architect at Microsoft, primarily focused on the Canadian market, but I do work with large global customers as well. Real quick, I get a lot of questions about my title, Cloud Financial Architect. What does that mean? In essence, I'm a data center architect that likes to do his own taxes. I'm also kind of a marriage counselor between CTOs and CFOs. I'm historically technical, but over the last probably 10 years, I've been doing fiduciary models of cloud consumption. How did your cash flow change over time as you move your workloads to the cloud, and then as you modernize? Because we see shifts from CapEx to OpEx in those situations. Today I'm going to step through some of the scenarios with respect to VM right-sizing, as well as using reservations plans and savings plans inside of Azure. And also I'm going to talk a little bit about automation, because I believe if you do things once, or even more than once in the cloud, you should also automate. So I might touch on some of those APIs and how you might use some of those. So for this particular scenario, we're going to virtually field promote Evelyn to our CFO. If you're in the press, please don't put that into Twitter or anything. This is only for demonstration purposes. We're not actually making her CFO. But Evelyn's come to me and said, you're on the FinOps team. We need $10,000 to fund a project coming from a business unit that we don't have currently. Can we free those up in the cloud somehow? So as a FinOps practitioner, I'll go to our cost management platform in the Azure portal. Within there, I'll start looking at Azure Advisor. Now, Azure Advisor is this proactive engine based off of an AI backend looking for patterns of savings opportunities. How can we classify a particular offer construct of a VM instance? It may start with pay-go. Well, there's reserved instance pricing. Well, what does that look like? What's the savings opportunity there? And in this particular case, it identified some compute units that are actually over-provisioned with respect to their resources, the number of vCPUs, memory footprint, maybe some other technical specifications. So it's a great quick fix. So the ask that I had from our field-promoted virtual CFO was free up $10,000. In this particular case, there's 11,640 of right-sizing that I can actually employ. So as I dive into that, it gets to the granular detail, the compute units themselves, where I could look at the identifiers, the tags, what budgets is it actually attached to. And in this particular console, I could actually click on that particular compute unit type and make that change. Also within Azure Advisor, you could look at the time frame of identifying those patterns. Now in my configuration for my subscription here, I already have it set up for 30 days, which is a pretty decent time frame, looking for the utilization within that particular period and identifying the potential of right-sizing those compute units, but you could set it as low as 7. I do recommend for some workloads, especially workloads that are batch level processing that may occur during fiscal terms, like the finance teams always like to run major batch level jobs at the end of each quarter, and especially at the end of a fiduciary year, to pay attention to those, tag those resources as kind of special, because their overall behavior will be a little bit more sporadic, if you will. Also, I have the opportunity to convert certain compute types over to those reserved instances. In this particular case, I could actually pick the compute type, that particular compute node, and I could change the scope of how these reserved instances are applied. I could set it at the management group. I could set it at the single subscription so that resource can be shared within the subscription or even within the same resource group. So it gets very granular. This is super helpful when you have a lot of different business units and they may be doing a payback into IT and they want to maintain their budget. They want their investment, they want attached to those RIs, that in particular investment interest. We also have savings plans. A little bit different than RIs, a little bit more flexible as well, very similar to some of the models of savings plans that you see from other cloud service providers as well. These can also be assigned at a very granular level, all the way down to the resource group level. So again, that business unit investment can be mapped back to that particular investment owner or budgetary owner. Another opportunity, especially when we look at portable workloads, containerized compute, or logic apps that have a proper session state type of configuration and architecture, is scale sets. Super handy for batch level processing as well, where I can go in and set the minimal scale set, the number of compute when we're not utilizing that particular application resource. What's the minimum number of VMs that I want to assign to that particular scale set, or the maximum number, so I could kind of control costs so we don't max out in a particular time with respect to budgetary spend. The last thing I want to mention, because I want to leave about 5-10 minutes or so for Q&A, I think we're doing fairly well on time now, is automation. Now, I personally love data. I've also been historically in a couple of data center operations roles with Xbox Live when we first launched and some other aspects. And over time, I've learned that if I do things once, if finance asks me to do things once or twice, it's most likely they're going to do it again, and a lot. So I love automating, scripting it. And in Azure, there's several different methodologies and approaches. You could even start with something simple like PowerShell and doing calls and pulling down data programmatically. That could be billing data, that could be price lists, that can be making changes to everything that we've seen in the portals that we saw today. I can make API calls and automate. Love doing that. So in essence, if you do anything more than once, you should look at automation. Another great way to employ automation beyond just rudimentary PowerShell or script-based calls is through Azure Data Factory pipelines, where you could visually see the logic, make those same API calls, and now you're executing that automation in the cloud on a particular time sequence or triggers. Super handy. I always start with the cost details APIs. What's interesting is over probably the last 8 years, we've seen some of the cost details APIs change, not just with Azure, but with other cloud targets. If you looked at cost details APIs, even for GCP, AWS, as well as us 5 years ago, you would make an API call and it would give you a huge data set. Maybe it's paginated if you're used to JSON paginated returns from API calls. Today, that's kind of changing because of the volume of data. You get millions and millions of rows. So what's transpiring now is you might make an API call and the work gets queued and you have to query for when that queue is done and your report's ready, and then pull down the data. We're seeing more and more of that, especially with the cost details APIs, regardless of cloud target provider. Another critical one is our pricing, our Azure Retail Pricing API. I love this one because it's not necessarily the agreed upon discount that you may get when you're a customer and you have an agreement with Microsoft, but it's super handy to get the full menu or catalog of everything Azure. Literally, I think it's, I won't call it out directly, I think it's 23 million rows or so of data. Every meter out there, every price point. What's nice about that is now I could leverage that to do some projective modeling, net new workloads. So I could query into that file and create a model of what I'm going to be spending over the next 6 months for a new request from a business unit, and then use that as a measurable KPI against my actual cost data, that first API call, to make sure that I'm being successful. A great example of that one is I worked with a healthcare organization that actually hosts hospital infrastructures on Azure. And then they set a revenue margin on that, and they sell that service to hospitals on a subscription basis. So their projective modeling has to be within a 2% range of actual spend. Otherwise, they're actually impacting their revenue stream. And it was like 6 months ago, they had an error in one of their Excel files, and they actually impacted their revenue stream by like 3%, and or their revenue margin on their subscription by 3%. It showed up in their quarterly earnings reports. But that was a more formula error. But it was a really interesting scenario of doing projective modeling and knowing what that cash flow delta looked like. Also, budgets and alerts. We have business units attached to cost center, profit center identifiers. Importing that data into budget and alerts, know if they're on track. And then underlying the budget and alerts APIs and the services that we have within the subscription is an AI engine projecting trending of spend. So you know if you're potentially over budget by per quarter or month. Also, invoicing APIs to help the CFO organization, the finance organization, doing settlement on actual spend and budgetary spend. And the reservation APIs to not just query into the reservations you have, but also make changes. As we saw in the portal, you can do it very programmatically. So that said, I think we're doing fantastic on time. I'm going to call up a couple of the other folks that are previous speakers and see if we have any questions as a follow-up. So,
thank you, Jeff. As a CFO, I'm very happy we're making investments on FinOps. You clearly know what you're doing. I feel great about our investments on Azure.
Yeah, and I apologize, and I have to de-promote you.
I know.
It was only for...
How much did you end up saving? Did we?
Oh, thousands.
Okay. Oh. Did you get any portion of that?
No.
She's not a good CFO.
Compensation of that.
Actually is a good CFO then.
Yes. Do you want to advance one more?
Sure.
So we move it. All right. We have a question.
They're mutually exclusive. So it's an offer construct that you attach to a meter, and only one can be employed at a time. Now, historically, the price points with RIs, of course, 3-year RIs, best price point, 1-year RIs, great price point. Savings plans tend on all cloud providers to be within like a 5 to 8% range of 1-year RIs-ish. It kind of deviates depending on like the price point of the gear. And then of course pay-go is the worst case scenario. So if you think about it from like a cost opportunity perspective, it's pay-go is the worst, savings plans, 1-year, 3-year RIs is how the cost construct kind of maps up, if you will. It would switch over to the RI. You would have to make that choice. Yeah.
What is stackable is your hybrid benefit. So you can use hybrid benefit and then reservation or savings plan. That's stackable for the same service. Thank you.
Oh,
how do we go?
Oh, yeah. So we have a mic runner out there.
Hi. This is regarding cost anomalies. Can the view be set up at a high enough level to encompass multiple accounts or customers? Context, I actually work at an MSP.
Yeah.
And I want an overview of everybody at once. I don't want to have to go into each of my customers to set up that cost anomaly detection.
Great question. I don't have an absolute answer.
Michael.
On that one.
I do.
Oh, thank you, Michael.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, the Vikram had to go. He's getting ready for the keynote thing. But note today, anomaly detection is only available at a subscription level. We are working on that, but don't have any ETAs on that yet. So, sorry.
Now,
I know.
Now, what you can do, as I mentioned about the data aspects and the automation interfaces, the APIs, is pull from those different resources and create that view, or perhaps in Power BI or some other tool set. Because in essence, I think our current setup is it's kind of delineated on a security level between those subscriptions, or those tenants, if you will. So it's achievable, but you would probably have to build an automation process around it. Oh, we have a question in the back, Michael. Yep.
Microphone.
Oh, Michael? Oh, yeah, thank you.
Hi, nice session. Question with Databricks. Do you have tools out there to optimize Databricks?
Ooh, good question. I'm not familiar on the Databricks side. You mean bubbling those up in through like advisor recommendations?
Advisor recommendations leading to RI recommendations for the underlying virtual machines?
Yeah, certainly with RI recommendations, savings plans, right-sizing those aspects. I believe with Databricks, that's coming in as well from the advisor side. Cool.
Thank you.
And
Maybe Michael needs to be up here.
To add to that, so you won't get right-sizing because the VMs for Databricks are so temporal that they're not going to be alive long enough to get right-sized.
Yeah.
But they will be covered in any reservations and savings plans.
So is there a tool out there to show you what your opportunities are with Databricks specifically in the advisor?
So hopefully that was caught. Is there a tool out there that will help you? Not that I'm aware of, but if you want to shoot me an email, then we can reach out to the Databricks team and see what they're doing.
There's a question here.
So my question is related to using Power BI. We're interested in leveraging that to get data out to various personas without having to log into Azure and everything like that. So with regards to, you were showing an Azure cost management app for Power BI, and then afterwards you showed, hey, you can start with a blank canvas as well if you connect it. Can we leverage that app that was built as like a template to get going and then customize it on top of that, or is that like a lockdown application that?
yeah, both Michael and I think have an answer.
How's it going? You can go if you have an answer.
Yeah, right now there's the Power BI app. That's the web-based experience with the Power BI plugin. It is relatively restrictive, where you can't customize it, but it's a great experience to get an idea of these are the views that are super helpful that I can create. Now, the Power BI plugin within Power BI Desktop that you see there, that cost management plugin, that will pull the data sets, but you still have to create those reports yourself. Now, the reasoning for that, or the thinking in around that, is, to your point, creating portals that are published out to internal units or business units or particular parties. And we didn't want to pre-create that. But you do have the flexibility to at least get the data into Power BI Desktop, publish it into like powerbi.com, and have that access control. Yeah, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing that I was going to add is, so yeah, the template app doesn't let you download it directly today.
Yeah.
Why it was done that way, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
However, last week, I have a personal GitHub that I just uploaded the template app to. So if you want that, I can pass that on to you, and you can get that and then customize it away.
Yeah,
I'm also,
that's the solution that's dropping it off the data lake, so it's much more flexible and extensible.
oh, no, not that one. Not that one. There's also that. So
one too.
we have this thing called FinOps Toolkits, open source thing, that is doing that part, getting the exported data, putting it into storage so you can export from multiple accounts and converts it to Parquet, which makes it faster, and anyways, a bunch of other stuff. But specifically, I was talking about the template app, though. If you want to start with that, then we also have that. So.
Cool.
And I'm working on trying to get a version of that converts it to Focus, so that way you can play with that as well. Yeah.
Cool. Probably time for one more question. I think we have a
Quick follow-up on the cost management connector. Does it work the same for EA and MCAs?
I think it does.
Yes.
Yeah.
You get prompted differently when you're making the connection, but once you get there, then
Yes,
Yeah.
similar
When
capabilities.
you ask, does it work the same? There are different APIs for EA and for MCA, so there are some subtle differences.
Okay, so I'm working with a client that they had that report set up with an EA. Then they were switched to an MCA and the report broke.
There's a different account, so a different URL that represents the account. So then they'd have to, yeah, and you won't be able to take the exact same thing because like EA has like this balance summary API, MCA doesn't have that. So there's differences, but yeah, and actually there's a lot of differences because even the data is different. So. Yeah.
Cool. As a quick follow-up, I'll be in the Microsoft booth from 3 to 5 this afternoon. And
I will too.
Okay, so yeah, we'll be there.
We're going to be hanging out at the booth. We're running out of time. We want to make sure you have time to get to the keynote.
Yes.
More questions. And if you want to join us and continue the conversations, please, we have sessions in the afternoon, well, morning and afternoon today. Stop by the booth, sign up, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.